Hey, what's going on YouTube? Alabama Reloader here. You'll have to forgive me just a little bit. I'm over here snacking on a blueberry Pop-Tart. I got my Diet Sun Drop rocking and rolling. So just like go and watch Johnny's Reloading Bench. I can't remember what it might have been 22 Nosler or 224 Valkyrie or something like that. It talks about the hype video. Basically the video of talking through all the components and everything prior to actually starting the loading process and really diving into it. And that's essentially what this is for 350 Legend. So, I kind of walk through sort of the thought process behind it, the rifle that we're going to be shooting, the components we're going to be testing right off the bat. But just to give you kind of a little backstory on how this came about, living in Alabama, we don't have any restrictions as far as, some other states do in terms of hunting, where you can only use straight wall cartridges, or you can only hunt with shotgun or muzzle loader or those type things. Some Midwest states that have those regulations in place. Alabama, it's a free-for-all, man. You go shoot you some deer with whatever. I think there is a minimum diameter requirement, but it's pretty small. So you can definitely walk into the woods with just about anything and go deer hunting. So we're pretty blessed and fortunate to be able to do that. So, the 350 Legend, it was something that was on my radar as far as like, I'd like to reload for it eventually. It's not something that I feel I need to go out and purchase right away, because again, the need necessarily, and I'll put that in quotes, need, isn't really there from a hunting standpoint. There's so many other cartridges that I can choose from that I have available to go and hunt. But an opportunity presented itself. I was able to come across a Winchester XPR in 350 Legend, and went ahead and jumped on that. And let's see, we can just start there, I guess, with the rifle. So the rifle, it's got the synthetic stock, some type of interesting finish on the barrel. I have no idea what they call that. I'm sure you can go to Winchester's website and look that up. But it's a nice little handy rifle. I mean, it's pretty compact. It's not an overly large rifle at all. Extremely lightweight as well. It's just a cheap synthetic stock. I mean, it feels, I'll be honest with you, it feels way better than the Ruger American stock. You'll see these compared a lot with Ruger American, the little ranch setup, because they make a 350 Legend ranch. Now, one thing that I do like on this rifle, above the the Howa 1500 mini action, the 300 blackout that I just shot that doe with, the magazine release on that Howa, man, that the part that you press, it extends out past the stock, and I find myself accidentally bumping that way too often, dropping the mag. For a hunting situation, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I have no idea why it was designed the way it was. This one is a lot more hidden, we'll say. I mean, you actually have to try to get your finger in there and depress that to release the mag. So I like that a lot more on this rifle. So pretty cool stuff there. Like I said, the rifle's super lightweight, which will be good, because primary reason for moving forward on this rifle setup and cartridge and everything was, finding something that my wife and my daughters could shoot and wouldn't have an issue with it. We could take it hunting and be effective on deer. So supposedly it has, less recoil than a 243 Winchester, which at least from, just my own personal experience and talking with a lot of people and being on the Alabama Deer Hunters Facebook page, it seems like a 243 Winchester, that's almost like the default sort of get your child and or significant other into hunting, You know, that's like the default rifle recommendation that people always give. Well, start them with a 243 Winchester and 100 grain bullet, and you'll be stacking up deer in no time, which is true. But this rifle, this cartridge is supposed to have less recoil than that. So I figured, hey, this would be a good opportunity to load up something that the wife and the girls can shoot. And it's going to be one of those rifles where, you know, it's not like a 308 where I take them to the range and they shoot it a few times and they're like, all right, well, I'm kind of over shooting that. You know, this is going to be something that they could shoot. You know, you put a couple boxes of ammo through it and you're not going to, you know, your shoulder's not going to be dying from the recoil. So I think it's going to be a good choice for recoil sensitive shooters, or just if you're trying to get someone involved in hunting or shooting, it'd be a good option. Obviously, if you live in a Midwest state where you have those regulations on, you know, you're allowed to use straight wall, you can't use bottleneck, it's a no-brainer in my opinion. I don't know why you wouldn't go with this rifle. So with all that being said, let's dive in component-wise. Of course, Hornady brass. Well, before I get started with components, really all of this is owed to, you know, big shout out to Matt, the owner of Mr. Big Guns here locally in Huntsville, Alabama. He came through in a really big way. He's been asking me, you know, he's asked me a couple times in the past, hey, you're going to get in 350 Legend, you know, what do you think about it and all that? And I knew I wanted to get into it eventually, just didn't know it would be this soon. So I told him, yeah, you know, that's my plan, but it's going to be down the road. Well, obviously down the road came a little bit sooner than anticipated. I sent him a message. I said, hey, do you have any 350 Legend specific reloading supplies? Because I might have done a thing, right? And he just kind of laughed and responded with, yeah, you know, we basically got everything you need. And so he pretty much hooked me up with all the reloading stuff. I told him I needed bullets, brass, dies, you know, all of that stuff for this cartridge, and he came through in a big way. So he actually, I was able to get 2 boxes of the Hornady brass. He only had Hornady. I would have liked to have gotten Starline, but I couldn't find Starline anywhere. But he had some Hornady brass. So I got 2 boxes of that. So we've got 100 pieces to play with. He had a couple of different types of bullets. He had the 170s and the 165s. You got the 170 interlock or the 165 FTX. So I wanted a box of each. That way, you know, try a different bullet and see how those work out. I needed a die set. So he hooked me up with the Lee. He had the Lee pace setter set, which is the 3 die set. And then also he had the crimp die, the 350 Legend crimp die. So, and that's going to come in handy if you're someone that wants to get into this cartridge for an AR platform. Then more than likely you're going to need to crimp. If you're very careful, I'll show you here in a minute. If you're careful about how you expand your case mounts, because that is something you're going to have to do on these. If you're careful about the expansion and the way you go about it, then for a bolt action, I don't think I'm going to crimp. Or at least initially I'm not going to, and we'll see how that works. But he has it, so I went ahead and got one of those to have. So he hooked me up with that. Also hooked me up with the modified case for the Hornady overall length gauge. And then I had been in there, I think a few weeks back, and bought these primers. He had some in stock. I bought 1,000 of those, so I already had those. But the load data, I believe it does call out small rifle magnum primers on the load data. And then the powder that we're going with, this is all powder that I picked up, you know, just kind of over time over at Mr. Big Guns. He actually just got in, he started carrying some Shooter's World powders. And I picked this up maybe, I think it was last week. I went in there and picked up a pound of that. Shooter's World has load data for 350 Legend with this powder. And so that's why I wanted to pick that up. I wanted to try a few different powders. Hodgson, on their website, they've got, I think, 5 or 6 different powders listed. We've got Lil Gun and CFE BOK, or CFE Black, however you want to call it. So these are the 3 that we're going to start with. And I've written down kind of some basic information here. We've got little gun. These are the maximum loads in the manuals, or whatever load data I was able to find. So this comes from Hodgson. So the max is 27.9 grains, and then for CFE BOK it's 30 grains, and then for the Shooter's World, the SBR powder, their manual goes 29.3. Okay, and these are the velocities with those maximum charges. So you can tell right off the bat, you know, and that's also a compressed load according to the load data. So CFE BOK, I mean, you're lagging behind, you know, 200, basically 225, almost 250 feet per second. So just gonna basically like 300 blackout, probably not even gonna explore this one a whole lot, probably won't spend a ton of time on it, but we are gonna use it just to see what we can push, what actual velocities we can get. I'll rephrase that. So, but the Shooter's World powder, the SBR, that shows the highest velocity using 170 grain, the Hornady 170 grain interlock, just to specify that. So that's what the manuals were referencing here. So it's all on the same, you know, we're kind of starting from the same page here. And so that's giving us our best velocities according to the manuals. But both of these powders are right around 2,300 feet per second. And so pretty much when I start the loading, I'm going to be starting near max. So I'm only, you know, my starting charges, or my starting test loads, I'm going to load up 5 for each powder. And, you know, the starting one's going to be, you know, just 2/10 below the max according to the manual. And then I'm going to work up in 2/10 of a grain, and I'm going to go beyond maximum in all 3 powder cases. I'm going to go, you know, above max for what the manual says. Not by a bunch, you know, by, you know, just what, 0.6 grains is what we're going to go over. But we're still going above max, and I know, you know, you always want to be extremely careful when you're working up loads. You actually want to start a lot lower than this and work your way up. I feel fairly confident, which might be a bad thing, in that we won't get ourselves into too much trouble. And part of the reason why is because the overall length that Hodgson uses for this bullet is 2.240. Now, Shooter's World, they use 2.260 for that. So 20 thousandths longer in Shooter's World. But what I have found is using that modified case and the overall length gauge, you know, the 170s, they start to basically make contact at 2.3 inches. So we're able to increase that 2.240. We can go, I'm thinking about loading these at 2.280. So we're going to increase our powder charges, and we're going to go above max, but we're going to extend our overall length, our cartridge overall length. So we're actually going to load longer than what the manuals say. And hopefully we did the same thing in 300 blackout. You know, we went above the maximum in the manual by a half grain, loaded a little bit longer, and no issues whatsoever, or at least so far no issues. And that's essentially all we're doing here. Because of the velocities of this cartridge, they're pretty anemic. You know, it's not best case. You're definitely not burning up the woods here with this guy. You're not lighting anyone's hair on fire with these velocities. You know, basically, a lot of people equate it to a 30-30, you know, velocity wise. And so the whole point is we're going to really try to push our velocities as safely as possible. We're going to push these velocities and see what we can achieve with the 2 higher velocity powders, right? CFE, I think we're just going to be handicapped. And that may shoot the best groups. If you go back and look at the 300 blackout load workup that I did, that group the best. But the velocities just weren't there for the bullet that we were using, right? The bullet construction that we were using. So same thing in this particular case. I really want to push the velocities. I'd like to be over that 2,300 feet per second mark. this is going to be sort of the same scenario as the 300 blackout. The distances that we shoot, that we hunt, we're going to be taking shots 100 yards and in. This cartridge, I've seen people, I'm also on the 300 or 350 Legend Facebook page. They've got a Facebook page dedicated to the 350 Legend. And there's a lot of people saying that, they've taken deer out to 200 yards, 250 yards. I've seen some people say, not saying that you can't do that, but you really start to lose, obviously your velocity's dropping off, energy, the whole nine. The bullet drop is pretty significant. If you're zeroing at a certain, if you're going to zero at 200, then yeah, you get away with it. But this bullet starts to drop pretty quick. And so you just have to take all that into account. And so that's basically what we're trying to do. We want to shoot sort of same requirements, MOA or better, right? We'd like to shoot MOA at a minimum for a hunting round. MOA or better, sub MOA would be great consistently. And then velocity of 2,300 plus, right? We really want to push these velocities and try to get some decent groups for both projectiles, right? For both bullets that we're going to try. And then, go out and test this at the range. And then hopefully if we can work up a load fairly quickly, then we could possibly take this into the field before the season's over with. Hunting season here in Alabama runs through February 10th. And so we could possibly get this thing worked up and be good to go before the end of the season. So that's really where we're at. I'm not really going to do any reloading on this particular video because I'm trying to hold my phone and it's impossible to do this stuff one-handed. But some of the, one thing I will point out that's different about this type of reloading versus bottleneck stuff is you have to expand the case mouth, and your lead die set comes with an expander, a powder through expander die, and pretty much what you're trying to do is open up that case mouth ever so slightly, just enough to where you can get a bullet seated down in there by hand. You can get it started and then allow the seating die to do the rest, right? But if you don't do that, some of the stuff that you can run into is, you're starting to scrape up copper on the bullets. You can crush the brass because maybe the bullet's not able to slide in there as easily as it would otherwise. So that's something on these cases. I went ahead and did a chamfer on the inside of the case mouth, and then I ran the expander die. Basically all I did, I started really, really slow, right? I kind of tightened this guy down, and I would raise the brass up into the die, and I would start to just make really small tweaks with the die, turning ever so slightly. And you're not going to be able to see this probably. I doubt I'll be able to get it on. But yeah, you can almost see like there's a change in the color right there. You see that? Around the inside of the case mouth. That's where it's going up over the expander. And all you're wanting to do is flare that case mouth just the slightest amount to begin to seat a bullet on it by hand and start just basically to allow the seating die to seat it a little bit easier, right? That way you're not crushing your cases. And that's something that you see people on YouTube. That's one of the things they point out. If you're used to just loading bottleneck stuff, that's something you never do. So you might roll into this thinking, along the lines of a bottleneck cartridge, but that's a step that you're unfamiliar with. So just pay attention to that and go slow. Make your adjustments small with the die, right? Just tweak it, and as you go, it's more of a feel thing. Run it up in there, pull the brass out, try to start a bullet, and then just keep making small adjustments until you get it where you want to. What you don't want to do is flare the case mouth so much the thing looks like a trumpet, right? That's what you don't want to do, because you're working that case mouth, and you don't want to overwork that case mouth. So that's just something you have to pay attention to while you're loading for this round. But other than that, that's where we're going to leave it. Again, huge shout out to Matt over at Mr. Big Guns in Huntsville, man. If y'all are local, if you're coming through North Alabama, you got to hit up those guys. I mean, they're a great shop. Ton of good deals on firearms, a ton of reloading components available. Of course, I mean, it's like a lot of places, you know, they definitely get wiped out fairly quickly. I mean, you when stuff shows up, obviously people are going and purchasing it pretty quick. But in terms of a selection, is the best selection around locally, for what I can find and what I'm able to see. Some of the other stores and stuff, they've got hands down the best reloading selection than anyone else close by. So it's a great shop, great place to go in, check out what they have. They're not able to ship powder and primers. They don't have the certifications and stuff, the hazmat crap in place, so they can't ship that. But they can ship, you know, projectiles, brass, die sets. They can ship those kind of things. So you can just go check them out, especially if you're coming through, man. Make sure you stop in and check out those guys. So hey to Matt, Tom, Will, all those guys over there. But other than that, that's where we'll leave it. Y'all just stay tuned, be on the lookout. This is probably going to be, this series, among other ones that I've done, will probably have the most videos involved in it. We're probably going to play around with this one quite a bit. So yeah, so we'll catch y'all next time. Y'all have a good one.